Welcome to today's edition of Tech Tuesday by Full Sail University. My name is Luis Garcia. I'm Vice President of Emerging Technologies here at Full Sail. Today, guest is Margaret Haag. She's a product design manager at Invitae. And let me give you a quick background for Margaret. She's a graduate of Full Sail University from 2009. And Margaret is a product design leader that thrives in bringing complex applications to everyday users. She has worked in many high user volume mobile applications for very important brands such as USA Today and Capital One. She very recently joined the biotechnology company Invitae as a product design manager. Previously, she was product design manager as well at Capital One for 7 years, where she created cross-platform feature designs for the company's credit management app, CreditWise. And previously to that, she worked for USA Today, where she was the lead designer for the nation's first college news app, The Buzz. Margaret was inducted into the Full Sail University Hall of Fame in 2018. Welcome to Tech Tuesday, Margaret.
Hello. What an intro. I was like, ooh, who's she? That's pretty cool.
You're pretty awesome, Margaret. It's so good to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. And same to you. Thanks for having me here. And also, thanks for having me here on Earth, Wind, and Fire Day.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's the September song they sing about September 21st. So
That's right. Very special day then. Margaret, I always like to start with the same question to everybody that I'm lucky to interview, and because I'm always curious about how did you first fall in love with technology, and what did you love the most about it?
Okay, so there's probably two things that I remember most. I remember we had this I'm gonna date myself a little bit, but on the back end of the 90s, we had this gateway that ended up becoming a really old bogged down gateway. But I remember GeoCities was this website host, and you could build your own website. So I taught myself the basics about code, and I made a website, like a fan site of Gavin Rossdale, the lead singer of Bush. So
Yes.
I was super into him, so that was that. And then I feel like I would moonlight at night. For some reason, I found that I think it was IBM chat-based program. Remember IRC?
Yes.
Okay, so I think it's way different than it used to be way back then. It's used for way different things now. But back then, it was literally like Slack is now, using the hashtags for the rooms and the ads and all that stuff. And it was this whole internet relay chat thing where you could meet people from all over, which was super cool. And you could join these other rooms and play games. So people would make bots, and you could play little games. I remember I would spend hours and countless hours, probably till 4 a.m. At night. So I think that was probably the first in the depths of high school in the late 90s.
But both of those technologies were, I was already working when they were out. So don't worry about feeling old. You're never going to be as old as I am. And what do you think that you like the most about technology?
Probably that it's always changing, and it's not necessarily that it's changing in really, really big fish kind of ways, but that it changes kind of subtly over time. As far as Elon and then Jeff Bezos, they were going up and touching space. That's cool, but that's not a thing that average people do. I love that for us, the technology that either exists in our hands or in our computers, or the way that we interact with products and services, how that changes and improves little by little and adapts and makes our life much easier. Even going on a trip, we were talking about flying on a plane, but now it's the only reason you really need the counter now is either if you have an issue or you need to drop your bag off. It's all kind of this self-service thing where you can go in, you can check in, you can get your boarding pass, you can print out your bag ticket, and all you have to do is drop it off. It defeats having to wait in those really long, exhaustive lines that we had before.
So I don't think that I told you this before the show. I don't think I've spoken with another grad that works in biotechnology. So I'm really excited to talk about that. And so first of all, congratulations for your new job. And for those that are not familiar, what is Invitae, and What is it? What does it do? How do you contribute to the success?
Cool. So I'm not going to attempt to like understand the whole thing yet because I've only been there a couple of months. And I would say it takes a long time to onboard and understand everything. And people like that I work with are so freaking smart. I mean, they're talking about things that I've never even thought about, like genomes and like DNA and like how all this stuff exists. And I'm like, I don't get it, but I'm here to learn. So I'm essentially just being a big sponge right now. But Invitae is essentially a genetic testing company. So, I mean, if people are familiar with like 23andMe, so you can send your DNA in, and then you'll get like a thing back, and it'll tell you essentially what percentage of like nationality you are, like where you essentially connect to the rest of the world. This is a little bit different. It uses like the same thing. So you essentially like spit into a tube and you send that back, and they based on so that the tests are all different. There's a bunch of different tests that you can order, ranging from like hereditary cancer to it's carrier screening for when you're about to have a baby to see if you're a carrier for anything. But anyway, you'll get these results back, and it'll essentially like understand. You kind of get a glimpse of into your future based on it's like your mother, your grandfather, or your aunt, or whoever, there's like a line of health issues, right? And you take the test, and when these results come back, you can see either if you're positive or negative. So if you're negative, then you essentially don't have the genetic carriers to relate to a disease. However, if you are if you're positive, it'll essentially tell you like what they've uncovered, in your genes.
And how do the people get these results? Is that like a report that comes in the mail, or is that what is that an application for they have to sign up in an app? I'm trying to relate it to what you do.
Yeah, good questions. So there's a bunch of different like areas of the team. So we have an area of the team who works on like forms and packaging. So that's like filling out the forms and what the actual package looks like. So when you open up, that whole experience of like opening it up, seeing the tube, how to label it. And then there's other people who work on provider. There's like a provider portal. So essentially, like if you are my doctor, you'll have a certain look into like patient information, ordering tests, the results that come back. And then on my end, if I'm your patient, I did it a different way. So I ordered my own test, and I don't have all of the like I don't have a great 360 view because I'm still learning, but essentially on my end, like I ordered a test, I activated it, I did the little spit in the tube, I sent it back in. And then on this side, what it has kind of like a timeline. It's like, hey, like you ordered your test, boom, we received your results. 3, your results are in processing and your results are ready. And so you essentially go into this portal that's online.
Okay.
And you essentially get to look at the results panel. But then you can save it. So it takes out the mailing you of your results. So as soon as you get the thing that they're ready, you can go check them out.
Oh.
And so after that, there's also like you can speak with genetic counselors, concerning your tests and stuff like that. So there's like a huge thing, and then the thing that, sorry, I'm going on a tangent.
No, please, I'm very interested.
So I work on 2 things right now. One is more future driven about like what does the essentially like the future of like health tech look like. So I'm working on that. I don't know how much stuff I can talk about. However, the other thing that I'm working with another designer on is this thing called Geo, which is like a little chatbot that providers use. So like if someone has an upcoming appointment and they want to get, that annoying thing you do every time you go in a doctor's office where you have to fill out that freaking form, and you did it a million times.
Again and again.
Why do I have this fill this out a million times? So it's this little chatbot that like they send usually a couple days before the appointment, and it'll be like, hey, like I'm here. Your doctor asked if you could fill out some information. So you essentially go in the chatbot. It talks to you like a person having this conversation. It's like, how old are you? What gender were you assigned at birth? Is there any history of cancer, with you? Is there any in your family? So you essentially fill out all this information before you get into the office, and then you can order tests from it. You can do several different things. And then they have partnerships with other different, like, I think they're doing a thing with Northwestern now. And if anybody's listening to this, I'm sorry if I botched it. But they have like partnerships with different clinics and stuff across the United States and across the world where they use this chatbot to essentially do a bunch of different things. And then this bot itself is also customizable. So you can write different scripts and ask different questions to collect different information from people.
I think chatbots are pretty amazing for customer service, and um, uh, I see that as a huge area of growth for all industries. I mean, that it will be so useful for so many things. Is the chatbot in written form, or is also voice?
Just written.
Just written.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just have the opportunity for the voice as well.
Yeah, I think that's all I know. I haven't gotten too much into that, so I don't want to misspeak on anything. If that's okay.
No, that's good. That's perfect. So let's talk about your background. In I think it's such a cool career because you started as a writer, and and even have a journalism degree from Penn State, which I can see behind you.
I
You
know.
had,
Sorry.
yeah, we gotta send you one for full, so you have both
I
your
know. I
alma
was thinking
mater
earlier. I need one.
And but at some point you decided to change careers and go into tech and design. How did the idea of become or to pursue a career in technology and design came about?
Great. Yeah, and a thing about this thing here. So I've actually had this since I was probably like 20 or 21 years old. So it's traveled with me for a really long time. That's a really good question. So I wanted to go into graphic design. I was always drawing. I was like, doing like hand type lettering, or like drawing like graffiti lettering, all kinds of stuff in high school. And then when I went to go to Penn State, it was such a different world, like when you think about it, you're like, oh, I'm going to pay a sum of money to go to college to learn a craft of a thing I want to do for the rest of my life. But going to Penn State was essentially not like that because their graphic design program only accepts 9 people a year and you need a portfolio. And I went to like a really tiny Catholic high school in the middle of Pennsylvania, where I graduated with like 58 people. Like we didn't have graphic design as the thing there,
Right.
that wasn't available to me. So I felt, I think, really unsure of what I wanted to do. I entered first as a psychology major, then met with an advisor, and he was like, you're good at writing and you're good at taking pictures. Like, you should go into journalism. And I was like, okay. So I go into journalism, and wasted a lot of my electives on like philosophy and art histories, which was super cool for me. But I ended up getting out of there and I worked at a student loan company for like 2.5 years. First as just customer service on the phone. Then I started doing writing professional, essentially emails or letters to people who would write in who had questions about their loans. Strangely enough, we worked on this like old school, like IBM kind of system. And somebody wrote in an email and I go look up the account information and this parent had a loan for their kid at Full Sail University. And I was like, what is this? I've never even heard of this school. So I went to the website and I don't know if you remember, like back in the day, the website had this like really cool flash of like the campus and like it had like street lights popping and it had like music playing and like I was like, what is this place? And
I remember that one.
yeah. And I was like, hey, you want to learn how to be a designer? We'll teach you how to do it. And I was like, what? Are you kidding? And no lie, within the year, I quit my job and I moved to Florida. I had no idea what was going to happen. And somehow I'm here.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you design those websites, and you know this now as a designer, and in your mind you're hoping that you will inspire people to feel like the way you felt. So it's in those early days I was part of the executive producing group that will work on those websites. It's so cool to hear it. That you felt the way we thought that we were hoping that people will feel.
Yeah.
And back then.
Yay, that's awesome.
So I think it's very cool in your career that you have worked in very different industries, right? After you became a designer and when you attended Full Sail and you went to, USA Today, which is a media company, and then you spent a long period in Capital One, which is a financial company, and now you are in a biotech company. And I think that's super cool that you have changed industries like that. So how does your job translate into the different industries? What do you
Mhm.
think that makes you able to do that? Because
Yeah.
people don't think about their career in that way.
Right. Yeah. Even when I was telling people what I was going to be doing, I thought like, that's really different, you know? And I'm like, yeah, it sure is. That's okay. I think before USA Today, I was actually at an agency doing half design work and half political motivated, design work, which is interesting. So
Wow.
I've been in, politics, news, financial, and now health. So I think what's really awesome about this, and I've thought about this a couple of times, is like being a designer, right? Like I essentially have we as a collective have the smarts and the foundation, like a foundation of how to do the job, right? So we have the building blocks for this, and it essentially doesn't matter. Like you don't have to be an expert in money, or you don't have to be an expert in news, and you don't have to be an expert in health, and you don't even have to be an expert in how social media works if that's something that you want to do. Like you kind of just have to be like really good at your field and like really good at what you do, it's like in the design part, and then the rest is kind of like you can essentially like pick where you want to go, like if in a year or two I was like, I want to go in sports and I really want to be like the lead experienced designer for, I don't know, the San Francisco 49ers. Like that could be part of my future. It can be part of something I do because I already have the skills. I don't need to really care or know that much about football, except maybe when it comes, I'll learn that stuff on the job, which is pretty neat. I just know how to do my thing.
I think
And
I think that every. Go
sorry.
ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say I like doing different stuff. I get bored too easily.
Yeah, I mean, I think today all companies are technology companies, and all
Mm-hmm.
companies are design companies, and I think your career is living proof of that.
Mm-hmm. I never would have thought, like literally never would have thought. I mean, especially even when I graduated from Full Sail, like, I mean, it was like the tip of the smartphone thing was just getting off. Like it was still getting off the ground, and we were still trying to, I think, I don't know, understand what it was and what it would do for us. But I feel like it flipped everything, like before it was always like the company is always right. The customer doesn't know anything, and now we like flip that on its head because these tools have like given us a voice. You can go on Twitter and complain about something, and that company is like, we don't want this bad image. We don't want this out there. And then, they respond to you pretty
Yeah,
quickly, which is really, really cool. You can get a lot of stuff solved pretty quickly.
that's great. I actually want to talk a little bit about that. About in your job as a in product design, and imagine that has a big user experience component. And you and I have talked about UX before. Um, when we think about problem solving in technology, we often think about how we will implement the tech for the tech to solve a problem. But once you put that in the hands of the user, then the user has his own problem with the tech. And so, why is UX or user experience design so important in developing technology products?
It is really important. So there's like a certain level of instinct and expertise that you that you develop over time, right?
Hmm.
That you can be confident in your decisions that you're making, and you're like, okay, like I'm here's the problem that I want to solve, and the way I usually approach it is I usually make three options. Okay, here's my safest option, here's my mid-range option, here's something that may be uncomfortable, but like if we put a little bit more effort, maybe another week behind it, it's something that could essentially like improve, greatly. Discuss that with the team. And so there's right now, like there's a bunch of, and even early in your career, there's a bunch of assumptions you can make. But the most powerful thing in learning is actually getting it in front of people, and testing it. So, and then allowing them to like, okay, so don't walk someone through how to use something, right? The beauty of seeing where you fail is allowing people to use the product as it was intended and like uninterrupted. And you're like, hey, you would love to buy this pair of shoes. Can you go in and select your size and add it to your cart? And watch them go through that whole process. And it's so fascinating because something will happen and there'll be this moment where they go, where you see them, hit something, and that's not something you expected, but something that people are doing. And when they do that, and you're like, and they go, oh, I didn't think that would happen. Or, oh, like even there's moments of delight where it's like, oh, wow, this is really cool. So there's different ways you can learn from that. So like the more that you end up doing that with people, sorry about that, the more that you end up doing that with people, then you instinctively, you start to like get these things that like start sticking in the back of your head that then reinforce these like instincts and decisions that you're able to make, essentially like on the fly. So you're consistently learning from people. And they usually say about, I think it's like 5 people that you can test with, where you'll get like a general consensus if something's going to work or it's not working at all, which I think is pretty powerful. Can you imagine that? Like you think, oh, I need to test like 100 people, but no, really, you need about like 5.
That is incredibly powerful, actually. The fact that in your experience, that's all it takes, about 5 people.
Pretty much. So if we ran like an all day in-person session where we brought people in, and we would do like an hour per person. So you split that up into doing 30 minutes of empathy research and then 30 minutes of essentially like user testing, which will be, using an interface, using like anything like on the desktop, the phone, or whatever, even if you built like this virtual reality of like cardboard boxes, in this room that you were like, we're going to transform this into a new like super gym and like see how people interact with it. We divide that up into 30 minutes. So in any given one big user testing day, we would test 5 people. There would be 5 interviews. And even if one didn't show up, we'd have 4, and we'd have like a general idea if it works or it doesn't work. And we take some insights from there and gather them, and then we synthesize them and then kind of figure out what to do next after that. And then usually there's another iteration. Sometimes, I mean, it depends on how big the problem is. Like if the problem is really small and it's about colors and buttons, probably won't have a second round. But if it's about something more deep, something is like, hey, how do people decide if they're going to, I don't know, pay cash for a new water heater or get a loan from a bank or use a credit card, right? Like that's a bigger problem that will probably take several sessions to figure out. But essentially, maybe we've tested about 20 people in the end, but we will have gathered different, insights that will inform the next iteration of that in one session.
And you mentioned the word empathy, which I actually had a question about that, because we have had this conversation before. When one think about design, you think about, the designer is like, this is my design and this is what it is. And but
I don't know anything about that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right, exactly. But to be a successful UX designer, it has to be absolutely the contrary. I mean, you have to be completely willing to give up what you do if it doesn't actually work, and so you have to have tons of empathy to the users, and first of all, it had to be tons of humility for yourself first, and then tons of empathy for the user, which is not at all the way we think about artists. How do you go about bringing this empathy into the process? We don't think about empathy when we think about design, but the reality is incredibly needed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, I feel like as I thought back on like who I am in general, is someone who consistently loves to ask questions for no reason other than I'm simply interested. And so if I ask you something, I'm coming from a genuine place because I actually want to know. I remember one time I asked someone, what does it feel like to be a mother? And she was like, oh my God, like no one's ever asked me that before. Let me think about that answer, and that's who I was before I got into this career. So, but every single day, and not to compare it to being in a hospital and working on patients. However, it's a good alignment, right? Because every single point of my day is thinking about other people. And how essentially something we make the whole experience of how we're going to make them feel, or what we're going to like motivate them to do, or how we're going to get from A to B as quick as possible without getting in their way. And with something as intense, I think is why I was very attracted to this space in general. So the last 2 years of Capital One, I was working on an internal tool. So I was working on this internal tool that was helping manage data for the entire company, which is super rad. The company was really in on it, and the whole like I don't know if digital revolution is the right term to be using, but for lack of a better
transformation.
I like, what was it? What am I talking about? Anyway, it was like this internal tool to help essentially manage all the data across the company, right? Which is super cool and super exciting, although it did not feed me as a person, you know? And it fed other people, which is great. But I was like, coming from that credit space, I knew I wanted to be in something that was like deeply rooted in like hardcore seated issues, you know? And I think being in this genetics health space was literally the perfect alignment of that. Like, I want to do my job and I want to solve really hard, complex human problems. And so every day I just put all of myself into literally like, how is my other designers feeling? What are they up to? Like, how are they solving problems? And then how is my product, my tech partners feeling? What are their hopes and dreams, and what are they doing? And then it's like, okay, now like who we're solving for, what are they feeling? What are they looking for? And how do I help them in their journey of like figuring out health in their future?
Wow, that is very insightful. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And we talked about and you talked about a lot about solving problems, and I've been on a quest to tell people what motivates people in technology, even though it's very well paid careers and so on, is like what people have in common in technology is that they want to solve interesting problems. And so let's talk about problem solving. I think that there's always problems that we get to solve and problems that we don't get to solve. And I found that sometimes the problems that we get to solve, the general public never get to know about. And but that doesn't take away from how proud we are to solving those problems. And so is that an example you can share of a problem that you help solve that perhaps people do not know about, but you are particularly very proud of?
Yeah. So I think two come to mind, but I kind of want to talk about one. So when I was working on CreditWise, we were understanding that, okay, so living in America, out of my control. However, the ticket to, financial success, home buying, credit cards, all that stuff, it comes through this credit score, right? Which is an interesting, really like confusing place to be, because you're like, I don't really understand how they're calculating this. And then okay, so like then I go apply for a loan and a bank is like giving me they're giving me their view into it, or like a car dealer, and you're like, okay, where did you get that? Because everything that I have doesn't line up to how you're getting it. It's like it's a huge game, right? So this one thing we worked on, and we realized this might be unrelated, but it's kind of related. We were turning away like 800 people a week because we couldn't score them, which could mean a couple of things, right? So it could mean that somebody had a credit card, they maxed out the credit card, they couldn't pay it, it tanked their credit score, they haven't done anything since. They have a file, but it's very thin, they can't have a credit score. And when we talk about people who immigrate to the United States, they don't have a credit score. They don't have a credit score. This is something they're starting out with, right? So, and then there's younger people. I'm 18 years old. I can now essentially I'm on my own and I'm coming in here. And I have like this, I'm just starting out this journey, and I don't have any, I'm literally just starting out, and I'm basically starting at zero. So there's a couple of different people that essentially come into this, and we were turning them away, and we were like, we don't want to turn anyone away. Like, we want people to have an opportunity to get in here, even if we can't give you essentially what you're looking for now. What we want to do is say, hey, like, welcome in. We can't really give you a credit score, but here are some things that you could do to help get that credit score. So we kind of flipped it a little bit, where it was like the experience, it would still hold the placeholder of where you would have like the credit score, but underneath that would have like a bunch of different content, or it was like, and I, worked really hard to like, the content is like this long. My job is then to understand how to simplify that content and make it interesting. So Worked on a couple iterations of that, and then I worked with one content designer and a product person and a tech team to launch that. So it's been something that's like sat under the radar that I don't think I talk about a lot, but because of that, you know, they're not turning away 800 people a week anymore. We're essentially inviting them into the door and saying, you know, we're sorry we can't do a lot for you right now, but here are some things that can help.
Well, wow, that's incredible. And it goes directly to that empathy that we were talking about. And it reminded me in the early days of the internet, we had these server errors. And so if you try to get to an HTML page that didn't exist, then we'll give you a 404. And 404 is basically, I couldn't find that document you asked me for. So, and I remember designing those 404 pages, like, here's the 404, and then really the user could not do anything with that, right? And or bad authentication, I think, was 500, and I knew the codes because I was a programmer, but really were not being useful for the user at all. So somebody hit that, what do I do now? What do I do with the 404? And that changed over time, and user experience designers like yourself decided, you know, that's really doesn't help the user, and it doesn't take you anywhere. You're turning people away, and now people don't even know that those things exist, even though they still exist probably in the servers. And because now we write error pages in a way that helps the user. And but yours has so much more impact though, because starting to get a credit history is so important. And as you said, it's like this random number that some other people are computing that has so much impact in your life, and yet you feel like there's nothing that you do to affect it. And even though you do, and you guys set out to educate people, and that's something to be very proud of.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And now there's the other side. There's problems that we want to solve that we don't get to solve because we run out of time, or the feature getting implemented, the technology is not really there and yet, and we keep those frustrations for ourselves, but those things that we wanted to solve and we didn't get to solve. So is that an example like that of a problem you wanted to solve that you haven't gotten the chance yet?
I haven't gotten the chance yet. This question is super hard. Only because I think any effort I put into something is a good effort. It definitely stinks when it doesn't do anything or go anywhere. But yes, there is that. Like when I think about it, when we were working on credit-wise, I helped launch the MVP, helped, you know, like launch a bunch of features that came after that, whether big or small, you know, and doing Android, like custom fingerprinting, a bunch of random things, right? But we had like a bigger vision for it, was essentially to turn it into, like, as it came to credit scores, it didn't matter. Like every single person has a goal when they think about credit and what they want it to do for them, right? So that could be, excuse me, I want to buy, you know, a laptop for my son, or whatever. And then it's bigger. Like I want to buy a home. I want to buy a new car, or I just want to get from my 550 credit score to like a 650, you know, to get to unlock, you know, more levels to achieve more things, you know, or have access to more things. So there was this whole, you know, push forward for years before I left the team. So it was like for maybe 2.5 years, that we were consistently moving in this direction. But unfortunately, because we went through idea, like workshop, persona, like setting up, like ideation, all kinds of stuff. Like there was no like unturned like thing for that 2 years, you know, like we were in it, we like understood direction, and then we like I unfortunately think, and this happens sometimes, and not to discredit anything that I've done there or anything that the team has done there, but the team itself, the structure of the team, like the lead on the product end, and the product team, and some of the design team overturned a lot, you know, which happens right after people essentially launch an MVP, which could take about 2.5 years. Who knows how many things you're building, right? People get exhausted and they're ready for something else. That's totally normal. But it's like you kind of have this like mass exodus, and I think we lost like a lot of steam through the overturn, and it was so kind of like starting over a couple of times, which I feel Man, I really wanted to do that. I thought it would be like the coolest thing. It's essentially help people set up goals and like give them, guidance on how to achieve those goals. And even if they fell, say, it's all right, get back up. That's the kind of thing I wanted to do and work on. So I'm kind of bummed I never got to do that.
Wow. I had never spoken with somebody with so much passion about credit. And it's incredible because I know a lot of people in the financial world, and they just don't. I wish they speak to you more, and you really see it from the side of the good that it's supposed to do, and I'm very impressed.
Oh,
You have the chance to work in applications that are used by a lot of people, and for those watching, I mean, there's a lot of every day there are thousands of applications that go into the App Store or the Google Store, mobile applications specifically, and not to talk about millions of websites that come online every single day, but you don't get the chance to work on those with very high traffic or a big user base, and because of the places you work on that have a lot of audience, the work that you do is used by massive amounts of people, in some cases millions of people, and that's impressive in its own. But what I'm interested is that what does that mean to you?
Damn. All right. What does it mean to me? All right. I think I talked a little bit about this in a talk once, and I might get emotional talking about it. I usually do. I think I talked about it in my interview with Invitae. So we worked on this feature, and it came out of user feedback from the App Store, Twitter, emails, whatever, all those different outlets. Where people are like, "Hey, you tell me my scores changed, and you didn't tell me why. What the heck?" I go in the app and nothing's happening. Okay, makes sense, right? I would understand because I would be super frustrated about that too. So rallied and worked with a pretty small team concerning this. We went through a bunch of iterations, bunch of tests, like nailed it. I mean, like I'm talking to the point where like I feel like every designer wants this moment when you're in a testing thing and somebody literally went, "Oh my God, this is awesome. Where can I get it? Is this available now?" And we were like, "That's it. We've done it." Which is like once in a million years that happens, which was super cool. So we ended up launching this feature. We did a little beta test with it and then ended up releasing it out to the world. And every now and then, because I'm super nosy, so I'm like, I go on like Twitter and I search like credit wise, I go like everywhere and I'm like, what's going on? What are people saying? And how are they feeling about it? And so I've seen a couple of times where people, have used like a screenshot of this feature that we worked on and saying how proud they are of themselves for going from like one certain credit score to another. I don't even know them. I'm never going to meet them. But even seeing that, and I was like, imagine all the people who didn't screenshot it, but were super proud of themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah, which was super cool. But there's also a really funny thing. I hope I can tell you about human behavior that I learned through that as well. So we got a pretty good metric back on it. So we included a little question at the end and it says like, did this help you understand how your credit score has changed? And we made it really simple, yes or no. So I think there's 80 some percent of people who said yes. And there was this other percentage of people from 5 to 10% that were saying no. And we were like, what is that 10%? What is going on? And even though, okay, sure. There's like a huge positive with this 80 some percent, but what about these 10%? So we go back and we start looking at the actual data of people. So we're like, okay, so we're understanding that the 10% of people who are answering no, their credit score went down. So it was a direct link to essentially like your activity, something negative happened and you reacting negatively to it,
Right.
which was amazing. I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Like
that's really super cool. Telling, actually.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
A really cool little like think of how people think and work,
Absolutely. Oh, that's incredible. What a great story. Uh, I, I added this question recently to some of the people that I interview because I realized that I was interviewing Rob Cato, in,
Mhm.
which you know, and he's a faculty here. He was my teacher back in the 90s. And he was recently inducted into the Modeling and Simulation Hall of Fame. And
Awesome.
it's an incredible honor. And he was very humble. And so I was asking him what that meant to him, and he said, "Well, if I have any superpower, I I guess it's bringing the right people on and together." So I get to interview all these very successful people in the show. So that would be something very interesting to ask anyone. And if you find success, it's because there's something that you do really well, and perhaps it's even beyond your hard skill. And so for you, what do you think is your superpower?
Mm. My instinct is always like to say visual design if we talk about craft. Super passionate about that. My superpower. Yeah. I like, oh man, I like to make people feel like they're at home, if that makes sense. I like, I genuinely care about every single person that has entered my life or exited my life, you know? And even through like, I know they talk about making a good impression on people is like so important for your career. And I feel like I'm a testament to that. Like I treat people with genuine kindness and respect. Because that's the way I want to be treated, right? And that
Uh,
like I want to give this positive, warm, and welcoming thing to other people because I want to feel the same thing in return. And that, listen, I haven't gone out and applied for a job I've gotten in 10 years.
yes.
Um, and that has it's changed. It's affected my life and the opportunities that have come, because of that. It's just trying to be a good person to other people.
Oh, thank you. That's incredible. um, Lots of opportunity in the technology field today, and I think that being in technology requires skill, but also curiosity, tenacity. And what would you tell someone interested in pursuing a career in technology?
Oh man. Probably a bunch of stuff I just said. Is always treating people with respect. Never, man, you got to be humble. That's what I will say.
Yeah.
Nothing than like a very fierce ego will like turn people off. Because like the biggest thing in this whole realm of things that I do, like a lot of my time is relationships with other people. And how do we work together and how do we figure out how to work well together and making like other people's ideas are as important as mine, and how do I make them and bring them along on that journey. My all of my time at work pretty much, except maybe like 30% of it is maybe 30% of it is me doing work on my own. The rest of it is consistently like always collaborating with other people. So you have to essentially want to do it. And
Yeah.
then you have to be like really adaptable. Like things change all the time. And nothing is ever the same as it was, even from today to yesterday. And prepare to have your babies, what do they say? Like pooped on or
Kill
whatever.
your babies. Kill
Yeah,
your
kill
own
your
babies. Yeah.
babies. Don't get, you're going to get attached to something, along the way, but don't just know that you'll definitely have your heart broken at a couple points.
Yes, absolutely. So being humble helps a lot with that.
Mhm.
Um, all right, so this we're getting to the end of our conversation, and my last question is always the same for everyone. I get to learn a lot from that. But technology, we're at a great time in technology where um, we get to make a lot of advances in very important things. I feel like in the 90s when I entered the technology world, um, we were getting information to people and
Mhm.
for websites, and and now we're addicted to the internet. And then in 10 years later, with Apple introduced this amazing piece of technology that you carry with you, and that opened up doors for
Hmm.
incredible applications. And now we're and we are kind of addicted to our phones. And then 10 years later, we get some other group of geeks decided that we should connect people, and invented social media. Now we're addicted to that too. And so I think having passed all that, I think we are in a new era where all of those problems that were solved actually helped us solve some real big problems, right? And the newer generations, I think that they are going to really save the world. So there are a lot of exciting things happening. So what do you see in technology today that gets you really excited about the future?
Um, uh, Small short answer is I went to a winery that is like made to look like a castle. And they had an AR experience for their wine bottles, and I was like, whoa. Like it like impressed me so much that I like got a subscription to wine so I could get these bottles. Which I think is really, really cool. A relationship between technology and a product, right? And an unexpected product at the same time. Another one that has been recently impressing me. Listen, I'm not a content creator, so I have a TikTok, but I don't do anything on it. I just like check out other people and what they're
Right.
doing. And I think TikTok is super cool because people are so clever, so creative. And literally like TikTok was like, not that it like revolutionizes anything, like it's generally like a pretty basic tool, basic in the sense where it took some stuff from Snapchat, it took the streaming thing, it took the swiping thing, it has a gesture thing. They have filters, they have video editing. Like they took a bunch of stuff that already existed and put it, into this application and then gave it to people and said like, here, you become the artist. This is just your platform to create art. And I
Right.
have just been like super into that and all the content that's on there. Plus I get to see all these people in the world do some really cool stuff that like I never would have seen before
Yeah.
if this thing didn't exist. Because if you think about like the social networks now, it's all about who I allow to connect with me, right?
Right.
This one is like, yeah, go view content from people all over the world. It's all open, we can check everything out, which is pretty cool.
Thank you. So I wanted to thank you for your time today, Margaret. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I hope to see you in person
Thank you.
soon. And
Yeah.
time is a gift, so we're very thankful for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Thanks so much for having me. And thanks to
Okay.
your whole team. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
for everyone watching, thank you so very much for joining us. And in a couple of weeks, we'll have our next show, and hope to see you then. Bye bye.